Boy vanished after visiting the dentist. 2 years later, a note is found in a toy chair. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday at Lakeside Elementary. The sun cast playful shadows across the playground as children's laughter filled the air. But for 9-year-old Emma Wilson, this day would mark the beginning of a nightmare that would grip an entire community. Emma's classmates remembered seeing her at recess, her motorized wheelchair allowing her to join their games despite her cerebral palsy. Her bright smile and determined spirit made her a favorite among students and teachers alike. Emma had been near the swing sets, watching the other children play while reading her favorite book. "I just turned around for a minute," Mrs. Rodriguez, the playground supervisor, later sobbed to the police. "When I looked back, she was gone. Her wheelchair, her book, everything just vanished." The alarm was raised at 12:45 p.m. The school went into immediate lockdown, with teachers frantically searching every classroom, bathroom, and closet. The principal's voice trembled over the intercom as she announced that all students should remain in their classrooms while staff conducted an emergency sweep. By 1:30 p.m., Sarah Wilson received the call that would shatter her world. "Mrs. Wilson, you need to come to the school right away." The principal's voice was tight with restrained panic. "It's about Emma." Sarah's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. The sound barely registered as blood rushed to her ears. "What happened?" she whispered, her professor's composure crumbling. "Is she hurt? We can't find her." 20 minutes later, Sarah's sedan screeched into the school parking lot, nearly colliding with her husband James's truck. They spotted each other across the lot and ran into each other's arms, their faces mirroring the same raw fear. "They said she disappeared during recess," James said, his engineer's mind already calculating probabilities, scenarios, solutions. "How does a girl in a wheelchair just disappear?" Police Chief Thomas Bennett arrived as they entered the school, his weathered face grim. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, I'm deeply sorry about this situation. We've already dispatched officers to search the school grounds and surrounding areas." Sarah's eyes darted frantically around the assembled staff and officers. "Someone must have seen something. There are cameras, right?" The principal looked away. "The security footage shows Emma at recess at 12:30, but then there's a gap, some sort of technical glitch. By the time the recording resumes at 12:50, she's already gone." "A glitch?" James's voice rose with disbelief. "How convenient." As afternoon turned to evening, the Wilsons watched helplessly as police officers combed through the school grounds with flashlights. Volunteers from the community began to arrive, forming search parties that spread out across Lakeside. Sarah clutched Emma's favorite stuffed elephant, pulled from her locker by a sympathetic teacher. "She can't be far," she whispered to James, though her voice betrayed her growing dread. "She needs her medication in 3 hours. She needs me." James wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, his own tears falling silently. "We'll find her," he promised, though uncertainty gnawed at his heart. As darkness fell, the search intensified. Local news vans arrived, broadcasting Emma's school photo across the state. Her bright eyes and courageous smile, the same smile that had helped her overcome so many challenges, now looked out from television screens and hastily printed flyers. Meanwhile, in the school's maintenance room, Charlie Peterson carefully locked up for the night, his hands trembling slightly as he turned off the lights. "Find anything unusual today?" asked a police officer stationed by the door. Charlie shook his head, not meeting the officer's eyes. "Nothing out of the ordinary," he mumbled, clutching his keys tightly. "Just a regular day until, you know?" As he walked to his truck, Charlie's phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it, his mind elsewhere, on a small cabin near Blackwater Swamp, where a secret waited that would change everything. The first night without Emma had just begun for the Wilsons. It would be the longest of their lives. The morning after Emma's disappearance dawned with an eerie silence over Lakeside. This wasn't the peaceful quiet the town was known for. It was the heavy stillness of collective dread. Lakeside had always prided itself on being the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and children played freely until streetlights flickered on. A place where the annual Cherry Blossom Festival brought everyone together, where neighbors still delivered casseroles when someone fell ill. "I've lived here 43 years, said Eleanor Jenkins, the town librarian, as she handed out flyers with Emma's photo. "Nothing like this has ever happened in Lakeside. This is where people come to escape the dangers of the city." The search parties gathered at dawn in the elementary school parking lot. The faces were drawn with worry but determined. Local businesses had donated coffee, donuts, and sandwiches. The owner of the hardware store arrived with a truckload of flashlights and walkie-talkies. Among the volunteers, Sarah and James Wilson stood like ghosts, pale, hollow-eyed, moving mechanically. They hadn't slept, spending the night making calls, checking hospitals, and staring at the silent phone. Lakeside Elementary has always been a safe haven. Principal Diana Morgan told the assembled crowd, her voice breaking. "We've prided ourselves on our inclusivity program. Emma was the heart of that program, our success story. The school's accessibility features, the ramps, the specialized equipment, the trained staff had been featured in regional education magazines. They had worked so hard to create a place where a child like Emma could thrive despite her challenges. How had their safe haven failed so catastrophically?" As the search parties dispersed across town, Police Chief Bennett approached the Wilsons with a map. "We've divided the town into quadrants," he explained, pointing to the colored sections. "We've got officers and K-9 units focusing on the areas between the school and your home, plus the park where Emma likes to go." Sarah nodded numbly, but James's analytical mind was already working. "What about the school staff?" he asked. "Has everyone been questioned?" "We've interviewed all teachers and staff present yesterday," Bennett confirmed. "Everyone has been cooperative, though we're still waiting on complete background checks." As they spoke, a maintenance truck pulled into the lot. Charlie Peterson stepped out, dressed in his usual gray uniform. He hesitated when he saw the crowd, then walked over to Principal Morgan. "I'd like to help with the search," he said quietly. "I know all the hidden spots around the school grounds where a child might be." The principal nodded gratefully, not noticing how Charlie's eyes darted nervously toward the police officers, or how his fingers tapped an anxious rhythm against his leg. Across town, 5-year-old Tyler Mason pointed excitedly at the playground. "Mommy, look! The girl in the special chair was going that way yesterday with the sweeping man." His mother, distracted by her phone, barely glanced up. "That's nice, honey." "He said she needed special medicine," Tyler continued, already losing interest as he spotted the swings. "They went in his truck." The crucial witness raced off to play, his innocent observation fading into the background noise of an ordinary day at the park, an observation that could have changed everything. As morning stretched into afternoon, the community's initial shock hardened into grim determination. Lakeside might have been blindsided by this tragedy, but they would stand together to bring Emma home. What no one yet realized was that the peaceful facade of their perfect town concealed secrets darker than they could imagine, and that the truth about Emma's disappearance was closer than any of them knew. 3 days had passed since Emma disappeared, and the Wilson home had transformed into an impromptu command center. The dining room table vanished beneath maps of Lakeside, each marked with colored pins indicating searched areas. The refrigerator door was plastered with Emma's smiling photos, a visual reminder of who they were fighting for. Sarah Wilson sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by printouts of security footage from businesses near the school. Her university colleagues had taken over her classes indefinitely. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally neat auburn hair hung limply around her face. "There has to be something we're missing," she murmured, squinting at a grainy image from a gas station camera. "People don't just vanish." In the kitchen, James paced while on the phone with his engineering firm. "I don't care about the deadline," he snapped, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "My daughter is missing. The project can wait." He hung up and pressed his palms against the counter, shoulders slumping beneath the weight of helplessness. James had built his career on solving problems, finding logical solutions to complex challenges. But this defied all logic. This was his worst nightmare, and no amount of analytical thinking seemed to help. The doorbell rang, startling them both. Sarah scrambled to her feet, heart racing with hope that quickly faded when she opened the door to find neighbors Carol and Bill Thomas holding a casserole dish. "We thought you might not be thinking about eating," Carol said gently, pressing the dish into Sarah's hands. "It's lasagna, Emma's favorite." At the mention of their daughter, Sarah's composure cracked. The tears she'd been holding back all morning spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate for the rush of gratitude she felt. Bill cleared his throat awkwardly. "Any news?" James appeared behind Sarah, shaking his head. "Nothing concrete. The police found tire tracks near the service entrance of the school, but they could belong to any delivery truck." What James didn't mention was the growing knot of dread in his stomach. With each passing hour, statistics about missing children loomed larger in his mind, cruel numbers he couldn't stop calculating. After the neighbors left, the Wilsons returned to their vigil. The landline rang continuously with calls from concerned community members, reporters seeking statements, and occasionally, cruel pranks that left Sarah sobbing in the bathroom. "We need to eat something," James said eventually, opening the lasagna. The rich aroma filled the kitchen, a jarring note of normalcy in their shattered world. Sarah stared at the serving he placed before her. "Emma needs her afternoon medications by now. Her muscles will be cramping terribly." Her voice broke. "Whoever has her, do they know? Are they giving her what she needs?" James reached across the table, gripping her trembling hands. "Emma is smart. She knows her medication schedule. She'll tell them. If they're listening," Sarah whispered, the unspoken fears hanging between them. The phone rang again. James answered, expecting another well-meaning neighbor. Instead, Police Chief Bennett's grave voice came through. "Mr. Wilson, we've found something. I'm sending an officer to pick you both up." James froze, fear crystallizing in his veins. "What is it? Is it Emma?" "Not Emma," Bennett replied carefully, "but it's her wheelchair. A fisherman found it in Blackwater Swamp this morning." The phone slipped from James's numb fingers. Sarah was staring at him, her face a silent question he couldn't bear to answer. How could he tell her that the device that gave their daughter freedom, the customized chair they'd saved for years to afford, had been discovered abandoned in dark waters 5 miles from the school? And how could either of them face what that might mean for Emma? Blackwater Swamp lived up to its name. Dark waters stretched beneath a canopy of moss-draped cypress trees, creating a primeval landscape that felt disconnected from the manicured lawns of Lakeside. The morning mist still clung to the surface as police boats cut through the murky water. Randall Cooper, a weathered local fisherman in his 60s, stood on the shore, repeatedly removing and replacing his worn cap as he spoke with Chief Bennett. "Been fishing these waters for 40 years, he said, pointing a gnarled finger toward a cordoned area where divers in black wetsuits slid beneath the surface. "Never seen nothing like this. Thought it was some kind of fancy lawn chair at first, till I got closer." Sarah and James Wilson stood a few feet away, arms wrapped around each other for support. The morning air was cool, but sweat beaded on James's forehead. Sarah hadn't spoken since they'd arrived, her lips pressed into a bloodless line. "Mr. Cooper noticed it around 5:30 this morning," Bennett explained, his voice professionally measured. "The chair was partially submerged near that cypress knee. We've expanded the search radius to the entire swamp." A young officer approached, carrying a clear evidence bag. Inside was a small purple backpack, soaked and stained with mud. "Emma's school bag," Sarah whispered, reaching for it instinctively before pulling back. "Her medications are in there." The officer nodded sympathetically. "We've recovered all the contents, ma'am. Everything's being processed." The prescription bottles were still inside. The implication hung heavy in the air. Whoever took Emma hadn't been interested in keeping her comfortable or alive. "I want to see the chair," James said suddenly, his voice hard. Bennett hesitated, then nodded. "This way, but please don't touch anything." They followed him along a wooden boardwalk that extended into the swamp. 20 yards out, Emma's motorized wheelchair sat on a tarp, its once gleaming metal dulled by water damage. The custom pink seat, Emma had chosen the color herself, was stained dark with mud and algae. Sarah's knees buckled. James caught her, his own face contorted with grief. "The electronics are completely waterlogged," Bennett said quietly. "We've got techs checking if any data can be recovered about its last movements." James nodded mechanically, his engineer's mind cataloging details even as his heart shattered. "The joystick is still locked in the forward position," he noted, pointing, "and the safety belt is unfastened." A commotion from the shore drew their attention. A diver had emerged, waving urgently to the forensic team. For one terrible moment, the Wilsons thought the worst had happened, that their daughter's body had been found. But as they hurried back, they saw the diver holding something small and waterlogged. "It's a school ID card," Bennett said after consulting with the evidence technician. "Not Emma's. It belongs to a maintenance worker at Lakeside Elementary." "Who?" James demanded. "Charles Peterson, the school janitor." Sarah gasped. "Charlie? But he's been helping with the search. He's been so concerned." Bennett's radio crackled. After a brief exchange, his expression darkened. "I need to get back to the station immediately. We'll have an officer drive you home." "What is it?" James pressed, grabbing the chief's arm. Bennett hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Peterson didn't show up for work today, and when officers went to his apartment to question him about this ID card, his landlady said he packed a bag last night. Told her he was going fishing for a few days." "Fishing?" Sarah repeated, looking out at the swamp where her daughter's wheelchair had been discarded. As they walked back to the patrol car, the reality of the situation crystallized with terrible clarity. The community search had been looking for a lost child. Now they were hunting for a kidnapper and racing against a clock that might have already run out. Back at the swamp, under the watchful eyes of forensic teams, something small and shiny caught the sunlight as it was bagged as evidence. A silver charm bracelet with a single butterfly charm. Emma's most prized possession, a gift from her parents on her last birthday, left behind like breadcrumbs in a dark fairy tale with no guaranteed happy ending. The fluorescent lights in the Lakeside police station hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow across the conference room where Chief Bennett reviewed the case files. Photographs of Charlie Peterson were spread across the table. His staff ID, his driver's license, and surveillance footage from the school. Bennett rubbed his tired eyes. At 62, he'd been planning his retirement next year. Now, he wondered if he could leave with this case unsolved. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Detective Maria Sanchez entered, carrying a thick folder. "Background check on Peterson came through," she said, sliding the folder across the table. 15 years at Lakeside Elementary, no criminal record. Before that, he worked maintenance at a children's hospital in Portland for 7 years. Bennett flipped through the pages. "Family? That's where it gets interesting," Sanchez replied, tapping a document. He was married, but his wife died 10 years ago. They had a daughter named Lily who passed away 5 years ago. She was 12 and had cerebral palsy, same as Emma Wilson. Bennett's head snapped up. "That can't be coincidence." "There's more," Sanchez continued. "Peterson has a cabin registered in his father's name near the edge of Blackwater Swamp. Property records show he inherited it 8 years ago, but he never updated the deed." Bennett reached for his radio. "I want that cabin surrounded now. No one goes in until I get there." Meanwhile, at Lakeside Elementary, Principal Morgan was conducting her own investigation. In the maintenance office, she searched Charlie's desk, finding nothing unusual until she opened his locker. Inside was a photo of a young girl in a wheelchair, smiling brightly despite the medical equipment surrounding her. On the back was written, "Lily's 10th birthday. Last good day." Morgan's hand trembled as she dialed Bennett's number. "Chief, I found something you need to see." That afternoon, Bennett sat across from Charlie's former supervisor at Portland Children's Hospital. Dr. Elaine Winters was in her late 60s, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Charlie was devoted to those children," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. especially those in the long-term care unit. He'd fix their TVs, bring them books, spend his lunch hours reading to them. What happened when his daughter was admitted? Bennett asked. Dr. Winters sighed heavily. It broke him. Lily's condition deteriorated rapidly. Our resources were stretched thin, and she wasn't getting the specialized care she needed. Charlie fought with administration, demanded transfers, even threatened legal action. Did he ever become violent? No, but he became obsessed with her care, started bringing in equipment from home, monitoring her medications himself. When she died, he disappeared for months. When he came back for his things, he told me the system had failed his daughter, and he'd never forgive that. Bennett's phone buzzed with a text from Sanchez. Found school surveillance backup. Peterson disabled cameras during recess. Footage shows his maintenance cart near exit at 12:40. Thank you for your time, Doctor, Bennett said, rising. Chief, Dr. Winters called as he reached the door. Charlie isn't a bad man, but grief can warp even the kindest heart into something unrecognizable. Back in Lakeside, James Wilson paced the living room, his cell phone pressed to his ear. They found his cabin, but it was empty, he told Sarah, who sat rigidly on the couch. They're expanding the search radius. Sarah stared at the photo album in her lap, open to pictures of Emma's 7th birthday. I keep thinking about what that fisherman said, that Emma's wheelchair looked like it had been in the water less than a day. What are you saying? The chair was found 3 days after she disappeared. Where was she during those 2 days? And why keep her that long if... She couldn't finish the sentence. James sat beside her, taking her hand. It means she might still be alive. Charlie might have kept her somewhere before discarding her chair, Sarah finished. Which means he might have moved her somewhere else. Somewhere safer. The doorbell rang, interrupting their theory. James opened the door to find Principal Morgan, her face pale. I found this in Charlie's locker, she said, handing them the photograph of Lily. And this, she held out a small notebook. Inside, in meticulous handwriting, was a journal entry dated 1 week before Emma's disappearance. Watched EW today. Her parents don't realize how lucky they are, or how quickly it can all be taken away. The system failed my Lily. I won't let it fail another special child. Sometimes salvation requires sacrifice. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth as the terrible truth crystallized. This wasn't a random kidnapping. Charlie had been watching their daughter, planning, waiting, and they still had no idea where he had taken her. The next morning, Sarah found herself drawn to the school. Yellow police tape still cordoned off the playground, fluttering in the gentle breeze. A memorial had sprung up by the main entrance. Teddy bears, flowers, handmade cards from Emma's classmates. Sarah knelt to read one card, written in a child's wobbly handwriting. Come back, Emma. Math class is boring without you. A sob caught in her throat. It's beautiful, isn't it? How much they love her. Sarah startled at the voice behind her. Charlie Peterson stood a few feet away, wearing plain clothes instead of his usual maintenance uniform. His face looked haggard, with several days' growth of beard, but his eyes were strangely calm. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. She knew she should run, scream, call for help, but something held her in place. You, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The police are looking for you. Charlie nodded, his gaze fixed on the memorial. I know. I don't have much time. He took a hesitant step toward her. I needed to see you, to explain. Where is my daughter? Sarah demanded, finding her voice. She reached for her phone in her pocket. Charlie held up his hands. Please, he said softly. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I've never wanted to hurt anyone. His eyes filled with tears. I know what it's like to lose a child. The pain never stops. It hollows you out until you're nothing but a shell walking around, pretending to be human. Despite herself, Sarah felt a flicker of connection. This man understood the torment she'd been living with. My Lily, Charlie continued, pulling out his wallet and opening it to reveal a worn photograph. She was beautiful, smart, so much stronger than anyone knew. She fought for every day she had. Sarah looked at the smiling girl in the wheelchair, her heart twisting with both compassion and revulsion that this man would try to draw parallels between them. "Charlie," she said carefully, "if you know that pain, how could you inflict it on another parent? On me?" He looked genuinely confused. "I would never." Then understanding dawned on his face. "You think I hurt Emma? No, you've got it all wrong." He shook his head vehemently. "I would never harm a child, especially not a special child like Emma." "Then where is she?" Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Please, just tell me where my daughter is." Charlie glanced nervously over his shoulder, then back at Sarah. "I can't tell you that. Not yet. But I can tell you she's safe." He hesitated. Would you like to get a coffee? I know a place where we won't be recognized." Every instinct told Sarah to refuse, to call the police immediately. But if Charlie was offering information about Emma, she couldn't risk driving him away. "Okay," she said, silently calculating how to alert James or the police once they reached a public place. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth of a diner one town over. Sarah had managed to send a vague text to James while pretending to turn off her phone. "Lily died waiting for treatment," Charlie said, staring into his untouched coffee. 5 years ago, the specialists kept saying next month. But there was always someone more urgent, someone with better insurance. His knuckles whitened around his cup. The system failed her, just like it fails all the special children. "Emma has excellent care," Sarah countered. "We've made sure of it." Charlie's eyes hardened. "For now. But what happens when your insurance changes? When funding gets cut? When some administrator decides her treatments aren't cost-effective?" He leaned forward. "I've seen it happen over and over. These children deserve better." "So you took her to protect her?" Sarah asked incredulously. "To save her," Charlie corrected, "from a world that will eventually abandon her." Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral, though horror and disgust threatened to overwhelm her. Charlie wasn't just a kidnapper, he was delusional. "I understand now," she said carefully. "You're trying to help." Something in her tone must have betrayed her, because Charlie's expression changed, becoming wary. "You're just saying that," he said, pulling back. "You don't really understand." "I do," Sarah insisted, reaching across the table. "But Charlie, I can't understand completely unless I see Emma, unless I know she's okay." He stared at her for a long moment, conflict evident in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Maybe that would help you see. Help you understand what I'm trying to build for children like them." Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket. James had received her message. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? James Wilson had spent his entire career noticing details others missed. As a structural engineer, his attention to minute discrepancies had saved lives. Now, he hoped this same skill might save his daughter. The recovered wheelchair sat in the police station's evidence room, where Bennett had granted him special access. James circled it slowly, taking in every scratch, every mud stain. "Something's not right," he muttered, crouching to examine the wheels. Detective Sanchez looked up from her notes. "What do you mean?" James pointed to the treads. "These marks, they're not consistent with being dragged through a swamp." He ran his finger along a straight, clean scrape. "This looks more like it was dragged across concrete or asphalt." Sanchez leaned closer. "Could it have been dragged across the boat launch?" "No," James said, frowning. "And look at this mud. It's too uniform." He scraped a bit onto his finger, rubbing it thoughtfully. "This isn't swamp sediment. It's too fine, too consistent in color." His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "At Millie's Diner in Chester with Charlie. Come now. Being careful." James's blood ran cold. "Sarah's with Peterson," he told Sanchez, showing her the message. "We need to go now." As they rushed to the car, James's mind raced through the inconsistencies surrounding Emma's disappearance. The disabled cameras, the too perfect mud, the wheelchair found days after she vanished. "It's staged," he realized suddenly. All of it. Peterson wanted us to find the wheelchair in the swamp. Why? Sanchez asked, peeling out of the parking lot, siren blaring. To make us think Emma was dead, James replied grimly. To stop us from looking. At Millie's diner, Sarah maintained her facade of understanding, though each word from Charlie turned her stomach. His delusion was more elaborate than she'd imagined. I've created a safe place, Charlie was saying, his eyes bright with fervor. A sanctuary where children like Emma will never be at the mercy of bureaucrats or insurance companies. How many children are there? Sarah asked, trying to sound interested rather than horrified. Charlie hesitated. Just Emma for now, but there will be more. I've designed everything: medical supplies, education materials, renewable power systems. Sarah nodded encouragingly. It sounds impressive. But Charlie, Emma needs specialized care. Her medication regimen is complex. I know everything about her condition, he assured her. I've studied it for months. I've been preparing. The waitress refilled their coffee, giving Sarah a curious look. Sarah tried to signal with her eyes that something was wrong, but the woman merely smiled and moved on. The police found Emma's wheelchair in the swamp, Sarah said carefully. Why would you get rid of it if you're trying to help her? Charlie's expression darkened. They weren't supposed to find it so quickly. I needed more time to get everything ready. He leaned forward. I had to make them think. Well, so they'd stop looking before I could complete the sanctuary. Ice slid down Sarah's spine at the calculation in his voice. This wasn't just a broken man acting on impulse. Charlie had planned this meticulously. You wanted us to think she was dead, Sarah whispered. Charlie had the decency to look ashamed. It was necessary, just temporary. Once everything is ready, you'll understand. You'll see what I've built for her, for all the special children. Sarah's phone vibrated again. James was 15 minutes away. She needed to keep Charlie talking. Will you take me to her now? She asked. I need to see that she's okay. Charlie studied her face for a long moment. You still don't truly understand. I can see it in your eyes. He stood abruptly. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have come. Wait, Sarah pleaded, rising as well. Please, Charlie. I'm trying to understand. Just tell me where she is. His expression hardened. I thought you, of all people, might see. Might realize what I'm trying to protect her from. He backed toward the door. She's safe. That's all you need to know for now. As Charlie turned to leave, Sarah made a split-second decision. She couldn't let him disappear again, not when he was her only link to Emma. Charlie, she called, following him outside. I do understand. About Lily. About the system that failed her. He paused, looking back with a flicker of hope that Sarah found utterly chilling. Then come with me, he said quietly. I'll show you everything. In the distance, Sarah heard sirens approaching. She had to make a choice. Wait for help that might arrive too late, or follow the man who had taken her daughter into whatever twisted sanctuary he had created. Time was running out. Chief Bennett wiped rainwater from his face as he studied the small cabin nestled against the edge of Blackwater Swamp. From the outside, it appeared unremarkable. Weathered cedar siding, a small porch with a rocking chair, smoke curling from the chimney despite the spring weather. Property records show this place belonged to Peterson's father, Detective Sanchez said, checking her notes under the shelter of a large umbrella. Inherited 8 years ago after the old man passed. Why didn't he mention owning property during his employment background check? Bennett mused, watching as officers in tactical gear moved into position around the perimeter. Because he never updated the deed, Sanchez replied. Technically, it's still in his father's name, Franklin Peterson. Bennett raised his binoculars, scanning the cabin windows. Heavy curtains blocked most of the view, but through a gap, he could see a well-maintained interior, not the abandoned hunting cabin they'd expected. Sir, a young officer approached, rain dripping from his cap. K-9 units have confirmed recent human activity. Multiple scents, including one that matches the sample from Emma Wilson's bedroom. Bennett's pulse quickened. She was here. There's more, the officer continued. We found fresh tire tracks leading from the back of the property toward an unmarked dirt road. They matched the maintenance truck from the school. When were they made? Bennett demanded. Within the last 2 hours, according to the mud displacement and rain pattern. Bennett swore under his breath. Emma had been here possibly just hours ago, and they'd missed her. Where would Peterson take her next? Sir, another officer called from the porch. You need to see this. Inside, the cabin revealed a disturbing glimpse into Charlie Peterson's mind. The main room had been converted into what looked like a medical staging area. A hospital-grade bed dominated one wall, complete with monitoring equipment and oxygen tanks. Shelves lined with medications and supplies covered another. Bennett examined the labels on the pill bottles. These are all the medications Emma Wilson takes. He's been collecting them for months. Sanchez opened a notebook on the table. Inside were detailed schedules, medication timings, physical therapy exercises, educational activities. He wasn't just kidnapping her, she said quietly. He was preparing to care for her long-term. In a smaller room, they found an old desk covered with architectural drawings, expansive, elaborate plans for what appeared to be an underground facility. Look at this, Bennett said, pointing to a notation in the margin. Sanctuary Phase 1 complete. He looked up at Sanchez. This cabin wasn't his endgame. It was just a staging area. His radio crackled. Chief Wilson just arrived. Says his wife is with Peterson. Bennett rushed outside to find James, soaked and frantic. Sarah texted that she was with Peterson at a diner, James explained breathlessly. But when we got there, they were gone. The waitress said they left together about 20 minutes ago. Together, Bennett repeated. She went with him willingly? She must be trying to get to Emma, James said. You don't understand. Sarah would do anything to find our daughter. Bennett's phone rang. It was the tech analyst they'd assigned to search Peterson's digital footprint. Chief, we found something in Peterson's email history, the analyst reported. Last year, he applied for a caretaker position at a defunct mining operation about 15 miles northwest of his cabin. The company rejected him, but satellite imagery shows construction activity at the site 3 months ago. Send me the coordinates, Bennett ordered. As they prepared to move out, an officer emerged from the cabin holding a child's drawing. A crayon picture of a little girl in a wheelchair next to a man in blue overalls. At the bottom, in a child's careful handwriting, me and Mr. Charlie in our special place. It's dated yesterday, the officer said quietly. James stared at the drawing, his expression a mixture of hope and horror. She's alive, he whispered. But for how long if she's being moved again? Bennett clapped a hand on James's shoulder. We're closing in, Mr. Wilson. Peterson's running out of places to hide. What none of them realized was that Charlie had spent years preparing his sanctuary, and that his most elaborate measures weren't to keep people out, but to keep his special children in. 15 miles away, Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Charlie's truck, her phone hidden in her pocket, GPS tracking active. As they drove deeper into the forest toward a future she couldn't predict, James Wilson couldn't sit still while the police organized their search party. The knowledge that both his wife and daughter were now in Charlie Peterson's hands was unbearable. When Bennett stepped away to coordinate with other officers, James slipped past the police line and headed to his car. Mr. Wilson, Detective Sanchez called, hurrying after him. Where are you going? I can't just wait here, James said, unlocking his door. Sarah's got her location sharing on. I can track where Peterson's taking her. Sanchez hesitated, then nodded. I'm coming with you. As they drove, James kept glancing at his phone, watching the blue that represented Sarah moving steadily northwest. She's smart, he said, more to himself than to Sanchez. She knew I'd track her. Your wife is buying us time, Sanchez agreed. But Peterson is unstable. If he realizes what she's doing. James tightened his grip on the steering wheel. I know. Meanwhile, Sarah sat tensely in Charlie's truck, struggling to appear calm as they turned onto a narrow dirt road that wasn't on any map she recognized. Charlie had been mostly silent since they left the diner, his earlier evangelical fervor replaced by a wary vigilance. "We're almost there," he finally said, glancing at her. "The entrance is hidden. Nobody has found it in all these years." "What is this place exactly?" Sarah asked, trying to sound curious rather than terrified. "It was an old mining operation back in the 50s, Charlie explained, his voice taking on that unsettling tone of pride again. "When they shut down, they left behind the infrastructure, tunnels, ventilation systems, power conduits. I've been converting it for 3 years. 3 years. The timeline sent a chill through Sarah. Charlie had been planning this long before he ever met Emma. "After Lily died," Charlie continued, "I realized what I had to do. Create a place where special children would be protected forever." He gave her a sidelong glance. "Emma won't be the last, you know. There are so many who need saving." Sarah fought to control her expression. "How many children were you planning to bring there?" "The main facility can comfortably house 12, he said matter-of-factly, as if discussing a daycare center rather than an underground prison. "Medical bay, educational spaces, recreation area. Everything they need." Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket. She resisted the urge to check it, praying it was James following her location. "Here we are," Charlie announced, bringing the truck to a stop in what appeared to be a natural clearing. Nothing about it suggested an entrance to an underground facility. Charlie retrieved a heavy backpack from behind his seat and gestured for her to follow. "It's about a 10-minute walk from here. I have to keep the vehicle access separate from the main entrance. Security measures." As they walked, Sarah memorized landmarks. A lightning-struck oak, an unusual rock formation, the sound of water nearby, anything that might help a search party find this place again. "You really thought of everything," she commented, hoping to keep him talking. "Had to," Charlie replied. "The system has resources, connections. If they found us before everything was ready." He shook his head. "That's why the wheelchair in the swamp needed them looking in the wrong direction." They approached what appeared to be a hillside covered in dense brush. Charlie pushed aside some foliage to reveal a steel door built into the rock face, camouflaged with earth-colored paint and artificial vines. "After you," he said, punching a code into a hidden keypad. Sarah hesitated, every instinct screaming at her not to enter. But Emma was inside. Her daughter needed her. She stepped through the door into a dimly lit concrete corridor. The air was surprisingly fresh, with a slight medicinal smell. The passage sloped downward, leading deeper underground. "The main living areas are on the second sublevel," Charlie explained, leading her forward. "Emma's room is in the medical section for now, while she adjusts." "How is she?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking despite her efforts to remain composed. "Is she okay?" Charlie's expression softened. "She was scared at first, of course, but she's adapting well. She's a very brave girl." He looked at Sarah with genuine warmth that made her skin crawl. "She reminds me so much of Lily." They reached another door, this one requiring both a keycard and another code. As Charlie unlocked it, Sarah glanced back the way they had come, mentally marking the exit route. "One more thing," Charlie said, turning to her with sudden intensity. "Before you see her, you need to understand the rules. This is for Emma's protection, for all of their protection eventually. No one leaves the sanctuary, ever." The door swung open to reveal his underground kingdom, and Sarah finally understood the full extent of Charlie Peterson's madness. Sarah's composure nearly shattered when she saw what lay beyond the door. The space was vast, a converted mining chamber transformed into what could only be described as an underground compound. Clean white walls, fluorescent lighting, and smooth concrete floors gave it the sterile feel of an institution, yet touches of forced cheerfulness. Colorful murals, potted plants, comfortable furniture created an unsettling contrast. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Charlie said, his voice reverent. "Everything a special child could need, protected from the outside world forever." Sarah saw medical equipment that would rival a hospital's, an educational area with computers and books, even a small indoor garden under grow lights. The resources and planning were staggering and terrifying. "Where is Emma?" she asked, unable to maintain the pretense any longer. Charlie's expression softened. "This way. She's been asking for you." He led her down a corridor lined with doors, rooms clearly intended for future residents. Each had a window, a hospital bed, and equipment customized for different disabilities. The sight made Sarah's stomach turn. At the end of the hall, Charlie stopped at a door decorated with butterfly stickers, Emma's favorite. Through the window, Sarah saw her daughter lying in bed, surrounded by monitoring equipment, and 4 in her arm. "What have you done to her?" Sarah gasped, all pretense abandoned. "She's just sedated," Charlie explained calmly. "The transition was difficult for her. She needs time to adjust." Sarah pushed past him into the room, rushing to Emma's side. Her daughter's face was pale but peaceful, her breathing steady. She appeared physically unharmed but unnaturally still. "Emma, sweetheart, it's Mom," she whispered, squeezing her daughter's hand. Emma's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Charlie stood in the doorway, watching with an expression of paternal pride that made Sarah's skin crawl. "See? She's perfectly safe. I've been administering her medications exactly as prescribed." Sarah saw Emma's chart hanging at the foot of the bed, with detailed notes in Charlie's meticulous handwriting. He had indeed been caring for her medical needs with disturbing precision. "Charlie," Sarah said carefully, turning to face him, "I understand now what you're trying to do, but this isn't right. Emma needs to come home." His expression darkened. "Home? Where the system can fail her like it failed Lily. You still don't understand." "I do understand loss," Sarah insisted, taking a cautious step toward him. "When Emma disappeared, I felt like my world ended. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. That pain you felt when Lily died. I've been living it every minute since you took Emma." Something flickered in Charlie's eyes, doubt, perhaps, or recognition. "The difference," Sarah continued, "is that I can still get Emma back. She's still alive, Charlie. You can end this nightmare right now." "It's not that simple," Charlie replied, his voice hardening. "I've invested everything in this place, in saving these children." "There are no other children," Sarah pointed out gently. "Just Emma, and she doesn't need saving. She needs her life back." Charlie's face contorted with sudden anger. "You're just like the rest. You can't see what I'm trying to build, the protection I'm offering." He lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's arm. "You said you understood. You lied to me. Let go of me," Sarah demanded, struggling against his grip. "I can't let you take her," Charlie said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I can't let you leave at all now. You've seen everything." Sarah realized with horror that she had miscalculated. She'd hoped to reason with Charlie, to appeal to whatever humanity remained in him. Instead, she'd cornered a deeply disturbed man who now saw her as a threat to his delusional mission. "My husband knows where I am," she bluffed, praying it was true. "I shared my location with him. The police are probably already on their way." Charlie's eyes widened, then narrowed with calculation. He pulled Sarah away from Emma's bedside, toward the door. "Then we need to move quickly. I have contingency plans." "No!" Sarah broke free of his grip, positioning herself between Charlie and Emma's bed. "I won't let you take her again." "You don't have a choice," Charlie replied, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a syringe. "I'm sorry it has to be this way, Sarah. I thought you might be different, that you might even help me find more special children who need saving." Sarah backed away, desperately looking for something to use as a weapon. On a nearby medical tray, she spotted a pair of scissors. "Charlie, think about what you're doing," she pleaded, inching closer to the tray. "Is this what Lily would want? For you to become a kidnapper? A murderer?" At the mention of his daughter's name, Charlie faltered. "Don't talk about Lily. You didn't know her." "I know she was loved by her father," Sarah said. "A good father who got lost in his grief." Their standoff was interrupted by the faint wail of sirens in the distance. Charlie's head snapped toward the sound, his face contorting with panic and rage. "You did lead them here," he snarled, lunging toward Sarah with the syringe raised. Sarah grabbed the scissors and prepared to defend herself and her daughter, knowing the next few moments would determine whether either of them would ever see daylight again. James Wilson killed the engine of his car at the edge of the forest clearing where Sarah's phone signal had stopped moving. Detective Sanchez was already on the radio, coordinating with Chief Bennett's approaching units. "No sign of Peterson's truck," she noted, scanning the area. James pointed to a narrow path nearly hidden by underbrush. "Look, footprints in the mud. 2 sets. A man's work boots and smaller prints that could be Sarah's." They followed the trail cautiously, Sanchez with her weapon drawn. The distant wail of sirens echoed through the trees as Bennett and his team drew closer. "How much further?" James whispered, eyeing the dense forest nervously. Sanchez checked her phone. "Sarah's signal ends about 100 yards ahead." They crested a small rise and paused. Below them, barely visible among the foliage, was what appeared to be a steel door built into the hillside. "An old mining operation," Sanchez murmured. "Peterson's converted it." James started forward, but Sanchez held him back. "Wait for backup. We don't know what's in there or how Peterson will react if cornered." But at that moment, a scream echoed from somewhere beyond the door. Sarah's voice. James broke free of Sanchez's grip and sprinted down the hill. Inside the facility, Sarah ducked as Charlie lunged with the syringe. The needle grazed her arm as she spun away, slashing wildly with the scissors. Charlie howled as the blades caught his forearm, drawing blood. "You don't understand what you're ruining," he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "I've worked for years on this place." Sarah backed toward Emma's bed, keeping the scissors raised. "It's over, Charlie. The police are coming." Charlie's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal's. Then his gaze settled on Emma's unconscious form, and a terrible calm seemed to wash over him. "If I can't save her, no one will," he said quietly, reaching for the 4-line connected to Emma's arm. Sarah lunged forward with a primal scream, tackling Charlie away from the bed. They crashed into a medical cart, sending equipment clattering across the floor. Charlie was stronger, but Sarah fought with a mother's desperate fury, keeping him away from her daughter. "Run, Sarah!" a voice shouted from the doorway. James stood there, his face pale with shock as he took in the underground room and his sedated daughter. Charlie seized the moment of distraction to shove Sarah aside and bolt for a side door. James hesitated, torn between pursuing Charlie and rushing to his family. "Get Emma!" Sarah gasped, struggling to her feet. "I'll go after him." Before James could stop her, Sarah was running after Charlie, her maternal rage propelling her forward. The side door led to a narrow maintenance corridor that sloped upward. Ahead, she could hear Charlie's footsteps and labored breathing. The passage emerged in a different part of the forest. Sarah burst out into the daylight just in time to see Charlie disappearing among the trees. Without hesitation, she followed, driven by 4 days of fear and anguish finally finding its target. The forest floor was treacherous with exposed roots and slippery leaves. Sarah stumbled but kept going, guided by the sound of breaking branches ahead. The gap between them was closing. Charlie was tiring, slowed by his injured arm. The trees thinned, and suddenly Sarah found herself at the edge of Blackwater Swamp. 50 yards ahead, Charlie was sloshing through the shallows toward a small boat tied to a cypress knee. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, her voice echoing across the water. Charlie turned, his face a mask of desperation. "You've ruined everything," he called back. "All I wanted was to protect them. By kidnapping them, by keeping them prisoners underground." Sarah edged closer, wading into the water. "That's not protection, Charlie. That's abuse." Something seemed to break in Charlie then. His shoulders slumped, and his voice cracked with genuine bewilderment. "I don't understand why you can't see it. The world is cruel to special children. I was building them paradise." "A prison can never be paradise," Sarah said, moving cautiously closer. "No matter how gilded the cage." The distant sirens were louder now, Through the trees, Sarah could see flashing lights as police vehicles arrived at the mining entrance. "It's over," she said softly. "Please, Charlie, don't make this worse." For a moment, she thought she'd reached him. His expression softened, becoming almost childlike in its confusion and pain. Then his face hardened again. "If I can't save them, no one can," he repeated and lunged for the boat. Sarah rushed forward, splashing through the knee-deep water. Her foot caught on a submerged root, and she fell, cold water closing over her head momentarily. When she surfaced, sputtering, Charlie was already in the boat, pulling the starter cord on the small outboard motor. "Sarah!" James's voice called from the treeline. He was running toward the water's edge, followed by Detective Sanchez and several officers. The boat's engine sputtered to life. Charlie gave Sarah one last look, a strange mixture of regret and defiance, then opened the throttle, sending the small craft skimming deeper into the swamp. But he'd only gone 20 yards when a police airboat roared around a bend in the waterway, cutting off his escape. Chief Bennett stood at the bow, megaphone in hand. "Charles Peterson, cut your engine and put your hands up." Charlie looked wildly around, searching for another escape route. Finding none, he slumped in defeat, his grand vision of an underground sanctuary crumbling around him. As Charlie Peterson was handcuffed and led away, Sarah waded back to shore, collapsing into James's arms. Her clothes were soaked, her arms scratched from the chase through the forest, but the only thing that mattered was getting back to Emma. "She's still unconscious," James said, holding Sarah tightly. "The paramedics are with her now. They're bringing her up to the ambulance." Chief Bennett approached, his weathered face showing relief and concern. "Mrs. Wilson, are you all right?" Sarah nodded, though all right seemed a distant concept after what she'd experienced. "What's going to happen to him?" she asked, watching as officers loaded Charlie into a patrol car. "He'll be facing multiple felony charges," Bennett replied. "Kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault. The list is long. His lawyer will probably try for an insanity defense." "He is insane," Sarah said quietly, but in the most methodical way possible. The underground facility had become a hive of activity. Police evidence technicians documented every room, every piece of equipment in Charlie's elaborate sanctuary. K9 units searched for any other potential victims, though it appeared Emma had been the first. Detective Sanchez emerged from the hillside entrance, carrying a stack of notebooks. "You need to see these, Chief," she said grimly. Peterson had plans to abduct at least 5 more children with various disabilities. He had their routines documented, their medications researched, even floor plans of their homes. Bennett shook his head in disbelief. He was just getting started. Sarah shuddered, realizing how many more families might have experienced the same nightmare if Charlie hadn't been caught. A commotion near the tree line drew their attention. Paramedics were carefully bringing a stretcher up the forest path. On it lay Emma, still unconscious but now with an oxygen mask and additional monitoring equipment attached. Sarah and James rushed to their daughter's side. "We've stabilized her," one paramedic explained as they walked. "The sedatives in her system appear to be standard medical grade, administered in appropriate doses. We've taken blood samples to confirm exactly what she was given." "Will there be any lasting effects?" James asked, his voice tight with worry. "We won't know until the toxicology reports come back," the paramedic admitted. "But her vital signs are strong." They reached the ambulance, where the paramedics prepared to load Emma for transport. Sarah climbed in beside her daughter, while James turned to Bennett. "I want to know everything," he said firmly. "Every detail about what happened to her, what he did, what he was planning." Bennett nodded solemnly. "We'll need both your statements, but that can wait until tomorrow. For now, be with your daughter." As James joined Sarah in the ambulance, officers continued to explore the underground facility. What they discovered painted a disturbing picture of Charlie Peterson's obsession. In a room that appeared to be his private quarters, they found a shrine to his daughter Lily. Photographs, medical records, even her favorite stuffed animals preserved under glass. Beside it was a newer collection, Newspaper clippings about Emma, surveillance photos of her at school, detailed notes about her medical condition. He was replacing his daughter, Sanchez observed to Bennett as they surveyed the room, creating a world where he could control everything, prevent any child from suffering Lily's fate. Good intentions, Bennett said grimly, twisted by grief into something monstrous. In the ambulance, Emma's eyelids fluttered. Sarah leaned forward, hope surging in her chest. "Emma? Sweetheart? Can you hear me?" Emma's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then widening with recognition. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. Sarah burst into tears, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Yes, baby. Mom's here. Dad too. You're safe now." Emma looked around in confusion, taking in the ambulance, the paramedics, her parents' tear-stained faces. "Where's Mr. Charlie?" she asked. "He said he was building me a special place where I'd never be sick again." James and Sarah exchanged pained glances over their daughter's head. "Mr. Charlie is going away for a while," James explained carefully. "You're coming home with us." Emma's brow furrowed. "He said I couldn't go home. That home wasn't safe for special children like me." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. "Home is the safest place in the world for you, Emma, and that's where we're going." As the ambulance pulled away, its sirens silent now that the emergency had passed, the Wilsons held each other close, their family incomplete but intact. At the police station, Charlie Peterson sat alone in an interrogation room, refusing to speak to anyone. His expression was vacant, his eyes fixed on something no one else could see. His vision of a perfect sanctuary, forever beyond his reach. The fluorescent lights of Lakeside Memorial Hospital cast a sterile glow over Emma's room. After 3 days of tests, examinations, and psychological evaluations, the doctors were finally ready to share their findings with Sarah and James. Dr. Eleanor Chan, a pediatric neurologist with kind eyes and a gentle manner, sat across from the Wilsons in a small consultation room. "Physically, Emma is doing remarkably well," she began, reviewing the chart in front of her. "The sedatives Peterson administered were properly dosed for her weight and condition. There's no evidence of physical abuse or neglect." James nodded stiffly. This much they had gathered from their own observations. Emma's body showed no signs of mistreatment. If anything, she appeared well cared for. "What about psychologically?" Sarah asked, the question that had been tormenting her since Emma's rescue. Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. "That's more complicated. Emma experienced what we call a benevolent captivity. Her captor was kind to her, met her needs, even created a narrative that he was protecting her. There was nothing benevolent about what he did," James interjected, his voice tight with anger. "I understand your feelings, Mr. Wilson," Dr. Chan said gently. "I'm simply describing how Emma experienced it, which affects her psychological response. She doesn't exhibit the same trauma patterns we'd expect in a violent abduction." Sarah leaned forward. "What exactly did she tell you about her time there?" Dr. Chun consulted her notes. "Emma says Mr. Charlie told her she was going to a special school for special children, where she would be safe forever. He showed her picture books of other children who would supposedly be joining them later. He administered her medications, read her stories, and assured her that you both knew where she was." Sarah closed her eyes, pained by how thoroughly Charlie had manipulated their daughter. "The most concerning aspect," Dr. Chun continued, "is that Emma still doesn't fully understand she was kidnapped. She keeps asking when Mr. Charlie will visit her." "What do we tell her?" James asked, his anger giving way to helplessness. "The truth, but gently," Dr. Chun advised. "Children are resilient, but they need honesty to process complex situations. Our child psychologist, Dr. Mercer, will help guide these conversations." After the consultation, Sarah and James returned to Emma's room, where she was watching cartoons from her hospital bed. She looked up with a smile that nearly broke their hearts with its normalcy, as if the past week had been merely an unusual field trip. "Can we go home tomorrow?" she asked, her voice stronger than it had been the day before. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, taking a seat beside the bed. "The doctors say you're doing very well." Emma nodded, then asked the question they'd been dreading. "What about Mr. Charlie?" "He said he was building rooms for other kids like me. He showed me the blueprints." James and Sarah exchanged a glance, silently agreeing it was time for the difficult conversation. "Emma," James began carefully, "Mr. Charlie didn't have permission to take you from school. Do you understand that?" Emma's brow furrowed. "But he said it was to keep me safe." "Sometimes," Sarah explained, taking her daughter's hand, "adults can believe something very strongly, even when it's wrong. Mr. Charlie thought he was helping you, but what he did was wrong and against the law." "Is he in trouble?" Emma asked, her voice small. "Yes," James confirmed. "He's going to be away for a long time." Emma absorbed this, her young mind struggling to reconcile her experience with this new information. "He gave me my medicines on time," she said finally, "and he built me a special room with butterflies on the walls." "I know this is confusing," Sarah said gently, "and it's okay if you have mixed feelings about Mr. Charlie. Dr. Mercer is going to help us talk about all of this over the next few weeks." Emma nodded, then changed the subject with the adaptive flexibility of childhood. "Can I get a new wheelchair? One with purple sparkles this time." Sarah laughed through unexpected tears. "Of course you can, baby." Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Detective Sanchez visited with an update. The evidence team had completed their inventory of Charlie's underground facility. "It was even more elaborate than we initially thought," she told them quietly in the hallway outside Emma's room. "Medical supplies for years, backup power systems, even a hydroponics garden. Peterson had invested his entire inheritance from his father in creating this place. All because the healthcare system failed his daughter," Sarah mused sadly. "That doesn't excuse what he did," James said firmly. "No," Sanchez agreed, "but it helps us understand it. And understanding may help Emma heal." As they spoke, Emma slept peacefully behind the partially closed door, her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been since before her abduction. The journey ahead would be challenging. Therapy sessions, potential court testimony, rebuilding her sense of security. But tonight, she was safe, found, home. 2 weeks after Emma's return home, the Wilson household was finding its new normal. Emma's bedroom door remained open at night, a nightlight constantly burning. James installed an advanced security system that sent alerts to their phones whenever a door or window opened. Sarah had taken a full semester's leave from her university position to be home with Emma. Small routines became anchors in their day. Breakfast together at exactly 7:30. Afternoon walks around the neighborhood. Bedtime stories that always ended with the same reassurance. "You're safe now. We're here. We love you." On a crisp autumn morning, Emma sat at the kitchen table while Sarah prepared her medications. Her new wheelchair, purple with silver sparkles just as requested, stood nearby, a symbol of her renewed independence. "I have therapy with Dr. Mercer today, right?" Emma asked, carefully sorting her pills into the familiar pattern she preferred. Sarah nodded, marveling at her daughter's resilience. "Yes, at 3 o'clock. Dad will take you while I meet with Detective Sanchez." Emma looked up, curious. "Is there news about Mr. Charlie?" Sarah hesitated, still unsure how to navigate these conversations despite Dr. Mercer's guidance. "The police need some more information from me about what happened." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer, turning her attention to the toast on her plate. But moments later, she spoke again, her voice smaller. "I had the dream again last night." Sarah sat down beside her, attentive. "The one about the underground place?" Emma nodded. "It was dark, and I couldn't find the door to get out. Mr. Charlie kept saying I had to stay forever to be safe." She looked up at her mother, eyes wide with vulnerability. "But I didn't want to stay forever. I wanted to come home." Sarah wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "And you did come home. You were so brave. Dr. Mercer says it's okay that sometimes I didn't feel scared when I was with Mr. Charlie," Emma continued, working through the complex emotions as her therapist had encouraged. She says feelings can be complicated. Dr. Mercer is very wise, Sarah replied, squeezing Emma gently. Later that day, Sarah sat across from Detective Sanchez at the police station, reviewing her statement for what felt like the 100th time. The preliminary hearing is set for next month, Sanchez explained. The prosecutor believes your testimony will be crucial, but they're trying to keep Emma's involvement minimal given her age and vulnerability. What about his mental state? Sarah asked. Has there been any evaluation? Sanchez nodded. The court-appointed psychiatrist diagnosed Peterson with complicated grief disorder and delusional disorder. He genuinely believed he was creating a sanctuary for special children who would otherwise be failed by the healthcare system. Like his daughter was, Sarah murmured. Yes, we've been able to verify his story about Lily. She died waiting for specialized equipment that their insurance wouldn't cover in time. Sanchez hesitated, then added, It doesn't excuse what he did, but it adds context, Sarah finished. She had found herself unable to maintain the pure hatred she'd initially felt toward Charlie. The man had kidnapped her child, threatened her life, and planned to abduct more children. Yet his motivation hadn't been malice but a grotesquely distorted form of protection. After the meeting, Sarah drove to Lakeside Elementary. The school had been closed for several days after Emma's abduction but had reopened with enhanced security measures. Today was Emma's first visit back. Not to attend classes yet, but to participate in a therapy exercise Dr. Mercer had recommended. James and Emma were waiting in the parking lot, Emma in her new wheelchair, looking apprehensive but determined. Ready? Sarah asked, taking her place beside James. Emma nodded, her small hands gripping the controls of her chair with determination. Together, they approached the main entrance where Principal Morgan was waiting. It's so wonderful to see you, Emma, she said warmly. Everyone has missed you very much. They moved slowly through the hallways, Emma's therapist walking beside them, quietly observing Emma's reactions. They passed the classroom where Emma would eventually return, saw friends who waved excitedly, and finally approached the playground, the site of her abduction. Emma stopped, her breathing quickening. We can turn around, James offered immediately. This is enough for today. Emma shook her head. I want to see it. They continued to the spot where she had last been seen, now transformed by the installation of new security cameras and a landscaped garden dedicated in Emma's name. We wanted something beautiful to grow from this difficult time, Principal Morgan explained. The children planted these flowers themselves. Emma stared at the garden, then looked up at her parents with tears in her eyes but a small smile on her face. I'm not scared here anymore, she said simply. It wasn't a grand declaration of healing, nor did it erase the trauma they'd all experienced. But in that moment, with autumn sunlight warming their faces and Emma's brave words hanging in the air, the Wilsons glimpsed the possibility of true recovery. Not a return to their old life, but the creation of something new, something stronger. Spring sunlight filtered through the windows of Lakeside Elementary as Emma Wilson navigated the familiar hallways in her purple wheelchair. Students and teachers greeted her by name, no longer with the cautious sympathy that had followed her return to school 6 months ago, but with the casual warmth reserved for any other classmate. Today was special, the 1-year anniversary of what the Wilsons had come to call Emma's homecoming. The day wasn't marked on any official calendar, but for their family, it represented a milestone worth acknowledging. Ready for your presentation? Sarah asked, walking beside her daughter toward the school auditorium. Emma nodded, clutching a folder of notes. I practiced with Dr. Mercer yesterday. She says I'm going to do great. The past year had been a journey of healing, not just for Emma but for the entire Wilson family. There had been nightmares and therapy sessions, court appearances and setbacks. But there had also been progress, measured in small victories. The first night Emma slept without a nightlight, the first time Sarah went to work without checking her phone every hour, the day James dismantled the excessive security measures that had initially made their home feel like a fortress. Inside the auditorium, parents and community members gathered for the school's first annual safety and wellness fair. Principal Morgan had transformed the tragedy into an opportunity for education. developing new protocols that were now being adopted by schools throughout the district. James was already there, setting up a booth with information about the Lily Peterson Memorial Foundation, perhaps the most unexpected development of the past year. During Charlie Peterson's trial, Sarah had been moved by the story of his daughter's death due to healthcare inequities. While she could never forgive what Charlie had done, she recognized the broken system that had contributed to his descent into delusion. With James's support, she had established a foundation in Lily's name to help families of children with disabilities navigate insurance challenges and access essential equipment. Charlie himself was now serving a 15-year sentence after pleading guilty but mentally ill. The Wilsons had requested that part of his rehabilitation include sharing his knowledge of healthcare bureaucracy to help the foundation identify system failures. Mrs. Wilson, a voice called, Detective Sanchez, recently promoted to lieutenant, approached with a smile. "Good to see you all looking so well." "We're getting there," Sarah replied honestly. Perfect healing didn't exist, but adaptation did. As families filled the auditorium, Emma took her place at the side of the stage. Dr. Mercer had suggested that sharing her experience, in an age-appropriate way, might help Emma process the lingering trauma while empowering her peers. Principal Morgan introduced Emma with warmth and respect, not as a victim but as a young advocate. When it was her turn, Emma rolled forward confidently, adjusting the microphone to her level. "My name is Emma Wilson, and last year, something scary happened to me," she began, her clear voice carrying through the hushed room. "But today, I don't want to talk about the scary parts. I want to talk about what I learned." Sarah and James watched from the front row, hands clasped tightly together as their daughter spoke about trusting her instincts, the importance of communication, and how it was okay to have complicated feelings about difficult experiences. "Sometimes bad things happen that we can't control," Emma continued, echoing the wisdom Dr. Mercer had helped her discover. "But we can control how we grow afterward. My family is stronger now. My wheelchair is purple now. And I am braver now." There were tears in the audience, but also smiles of recognition and hope. Emma concluded by unveiling a student-created safety pledge that would hang in every classroom, a project she had helped develop with her peers. Afterward, as families mingled at the various information booths, Chief Bennett approached the Wilsons. "She's quite remarkable," he said, nodding toward Emma, who was chatting animatedly with classmates. "Not many adults could have processed such an experience with that kind of wisdom." "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for," Sarah replied, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and lingering protectiveness. "But they shouldn't have to be." As the fair concluded and they prepared to head home, Emma rolled up to her parents with a permission slip in hand. "The science class is going on a field trip next week," she announced. "Can I go?" A year ago, such a request would have triggered immediate anxiety for Sarah and James. Today, they exchanged a glance, took a collective breath, and nodded. "Of course you can," James said, signing the form. As they left the school together, Emma racing ahead in her wheelchair toward their car, Sarah and James walked hand in hand in the spring sunshine. The shadows of the past year hadn't disappeared completely. Perhaps they never would, but they had learned to walk forward nonetheless, step by step, day by day, into a future that held both caution and hope in careful balance.